morning. Welcome to Accelerated Algebra 2 and Investigative Algebra, Lincoln High School, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. But we're not going to be talking about algebra today because I'm not an algebra teacher. I'm a substitute. And instead, I'm subbing in for Schopenhauer again, doing a little extension of the introduction video to Schopenhauer that I did the other day. So I think one of the worries with talking about somebody like this is, okay, these books were almost, some of them over 200 years old, and some a little bit less, but anyways, they must be outdated. At least our science has progressed a tremendous amount, and there's no point in really reading these guys because there's people more recent than that are more worthwhile. I think that's a bad view for a couple of reasons, but just the main thing that I wanted to say today, I was reading Jacques Panksepp, Effective Neuroscience. And this book, it's a little old. It's probably like a little over 20 years old. I think it came out in '98 or something like that. So it's not exactly on the cutting edge of neuroscience, but it's still a pretty influential book. And as well as Ian McGilchrist, The Master and His Emissary. So these are pretty influential books from pretty recently, in which Schopenhauer's views are quite plainly corroborated. Like here is Panksepp basically saying that the normal scientific materialist reductionist view that sees all properties of the mind as reducible to states of the material natural world, that prevailing view, he says, I think that's correct. At the same time, there's people that maintain with equal vigor that the mind is epistemically prior to nature as well, and that all our concepts of nature necessarily filtered through the mind or from the mind, and it has priority in that sense. And he says, I think that's correct too, that the mind is transcendent in that way. That is exactly a statement of transcendental idealism, and I might add, not nearly as poignantly expressed as Schopenhauer is able to do, because it's not just about the correctness of his views, although it is, but it's also about the rewarding experience of becoming acquainted with a brilliant individual and great writer like Schopenhauer. And then there's in McGilchrist, he talks about, like, there's a chapter right here called the primacy of the unconscious will. And if you go to Schopenhauer almost 200 years ago, or more than 200 years ago, he has, well, I'm thinking in volume 2, he has like the primacy of the will and self-consciousness. He has chapters of almost the exact same names on the same sorts of ideas. And again, expressed quite powerfully. He's not talking about, like, will for Schopenhauer was not just our conscious experience of will and like voluntary movements and things like that. For him, everything was will top to bottom. So even like when you're sleeping and your brain is doing all these sorts of nourishing things that it can't do during the day, he's like, that's the will, and our recognition of ourselves as being a same part of that thing. He would call it like the miracle par excellence, or kad ekehon exohen. I don't know what the Greek is right there. Kad exohen, according to whatever. But he would call it, the miracle par excellence, that we can have the possibility of identifying our knowing conscious selves with our will and our unconscious will. He's like, that's the knot of the world. And I see all sorts of corroborations of the same sorts of ideas too. I mean, you even get papers written. I read a paper last year in physics about how maybe time and space are transcendental, which what that means is basically like the way that we experience time and space are always already filtered through the way that our brain constructs those things. So like, it's not right to attribute time and space to the world outside of human cognition or animal cognition or whatever. because we don't receive them in that way. We only get them in the way that we get them. And one way I think about that is like, like a fan when it's sitting still, you can reach your hand through it, but when the fan is spinning really fast and you try to touch it, it almost looks more like a solid disc, and you can't reach your hand through it. You'll run into it. In the same way, like the way that we see a planet as a sphere, that doesn't mean that it really is that, because if we perceived time and space in a different sort of way, it would look like a ring around the more solid body shape of the sun that's a little more stable. It would be a little more oblong because it wiggles, but like the planets would look like rings around it. But the way that we experience time and space make it so that they're solid bodied spherical objects that revolve around the sun. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, this stuff is not ancient history. And Panksepp says right here, okay, so I'll just read this. The two views of reality, the natural and the transcendental, which is what transcendental idealism is an attempt to wrap together, are in evident and deep conflict. The mind, it seems, is transcendent to nature, yet according to the natural sciences, that transcendental realm must be materially supported and as such is subject to natural law. Resolving this conflict is and will remain a primary intellectual challenge to our civilization for the next several centuries. Right? So it's clearly not ancient history. And, like Schopenhauer has, he'll say, yeah, absolutely, the world is perfectly material, and materialism is true. It's just not enough. If you developed a fully, complete account of physics and natural science and materialism, it would, in the end, be just a list of laws that you can't explain, or whatever. And Panksepp says damn near the same thing right here, not that long ago, in a book that people still read in psychology and neuroscience. Yeah, so I don't know if that was any more motivation to engage with the dude. Think if I have anything else.